Welcome to the First Shogun, Rise of the Genji. The opening chapter of Japan's greatest samurai tale begins with these lines.
祇園精舎の鐘の声、諸行無常の響きあり。
The sound of the Gion Shoja bells echoes the impermanence of all things. The color of the Sala flowers reveals the truth that the prosperous must decline. The proud do not endure, they are like a dream on a spring night. The mighty fall at last, they are as dust before the wind. So begins the opening of the tale of the Heike, an epic account of Japan's great medieval civil war that has been called the Iliad of Japan. Like Homer's ancient tale, it is a story that was passed down across generations by travelling bards, singing songs of the heroic deeds of the distant past, before it was eventually written down by scribes many centuries ago. It is a story of two samurai families, the Taira, or Heike, after which the tale is named, and the Minamoto, also known as the Genji. In many ways, the tale reads today not so much like the Iliad, but as a Japanese Game of Thrones, but the war it describes really did happen, and the characters in the story lived and breathed and died more than 8 centuries ago. The Gempei War, as it is now known, stretched across much of Japan and lasted for just over 5 years. In the end, only one of the clans would survive, and it would establish a form of government, a shogunate, that incredibly would last until 1868, a period of more than 650 years. Now today when we hear the word shogun, many of us probably think of the main character in James Clavell's novel Shogun, and in the TV adaptations that the novel inspired, most recently with Hiroyuki Sanada as the military leader of Japan, Lord Toranaga. Although fictitious, Clavell's Toranaga is based on a real historical figure, Tokugawa Ieyasu, a man who unified Japan in the early 1600s and brought about an era of peace that would last for 2 centuries. But just like Clavell's Toranaga, to secure his title of shogun, Ieyasu Tokugawa needed legitimacy, and to that end he claimed to be a direct descendant of the greatest samurai clan of ancient Japan, the Seiwa Genji, and to have a direct line back to a very important ancestor from the 12th century, a samurai by the name of Minamoto no Yoritomo, the man who would lead the Genji to victory in the Gempei War. For it was Yoritomo who took up the Genji cause when all seemed lost, and who forged a path that would change Japanese history forever. So in this season of podcasts, we'll explore those 5 turbulent years of the Gempei War and witness the rise of the Genji. We'll see how Yoritomo, together with his half-brother Yoshitsune, set out to bring back honor to the samurai. There are many names and places we'll encounter in this story, so let me be your guide as we trace this amazing story of how Minamoto no Yoritomo became Japan's first shogun. To understand the origins of the Seiwa Genji, we have to go back many centuries to a time that is shrouded in myth, to the earliest years of medieval Japan more than 1,000 years ago. It began with the Emperor Seiwa, who had many children, and among his descendants was a warrior named Mitsunaga, who was the first to take the name of Minamoto, or Genji. Mitsunaga was given the title of Chinjufu Shogun, or Commander-in-Chief of the Defense of the North. Entrusted with the empire's protection against the northern tribes, Mitsunaga decided he must possess the greatest sword in the realm. To this end he procured much iron and had the most skillful smiths summoned, and he tasked them with forging a great sword. The result was a blade that was so fine and so sharp that it could behead a prisoner and slice cleanly through his beard, and thus it came to be known as Higekiri, or beard cutter. With Higekiri at his side, Mitsunaga led his clan to victory after victory, and the Genji became known as the teeth and claws of the emperor. It was said even the trees and plants inclined before them, for whoever possessed the sword Higekiri would be the mightiest warrior in the land. On his death, Mitsunaga passed the sword to his son, Yorimitsu, who would go on to become an even greater warrior than his father. Yorimitsu's acts of valor are renowned even today in Japan, most famously his encounter at Rashomon Gate, where he used Higekiri to cut down a demon that was terrorizing the people of the capital. So it was that Higekiri passed down over the centuries through Mitsunaga's bloodline, until eventually it came into the hands of the Genji clan leader Tameyoshi. But Tameyoshi became weak-minded in his old age and was seduced by the appeals of a scheming former emperor who convinced him to join an uprising against the rightful emperor Go Shirakawa. Tameyoshi in turn persuaded all of his sons to join the rebellion, except one, his eldest son Yoshitomo, who refused to stand with his father and his brothers. In what would become known as the Hogen Rebellion, Yoshitomo led the rightful emperor's forces to victory, but Yoshitomo's position as the new Genji leader was fragile. Because of their role in the rebellion, he was ordered to execute not only his father, but also all of his brothers. Reluctantly, he oversaw their executions, and thus, for now, it seemed that the Genji clan's existence hung by a thread, for very few Genji remained. And as the Genji's fortunes faded, so another rival clan rose in power, the Heike, under their ruthless leader Lord Kiyomori. Over the years, Kiyomori's thirst for power became an obsession, and his ambition threatened the stability of the realm. To counter the Heike's influence, Yoshitomo launched a surprise attack, a last, desperate attempt to stop the rise of Kiyomori. Raising aloft his sword Higekiri, Yoshitomo called on his dwindling supporters to repel the Heike from the imperial palace. At the great battle of Taiken Gate, Yoshitomo pushed back the Heike, but his victory was short-lived. An act of treachery by one of his own generals tilted the balance of power to Kiyomori. The Genji were defeated on the banks of the Kamo River. Yoshitomo escaped through the mountain passes, but he was betrayed again and murdered by one of his own retainers. Before he died, however, as he was pursued in a snowstorm through the mountains, Yoshitomo passed Higekiri to his eldest surviving son, the now 15-year-old Yoritomo, a young man who would become one of the most famous leaders in Japan's history. Yoritomo clutched the sword and fled through the snowstorm, but he was finally captured by the Heike and taken in chains to Kiyomori's stronghold of Rokuhara. There he was forced to submit to the Heike warlord and bequeath his family's honor and the sword Higekiri to his most hated rival. His execution would surely follow. But then, in a strange twist of fate, the all-powerful Lord Kiyomori, his judgment clouded by his own hubris, decided not to execute Yoritomo, and instead exiled him to a distant province, Izu. There he was left to live out a lonely life, forgotten by the Heike as they continued their relentless rise to power. And so Yoritomo spent decades in exile, while much of the nation wallowed in poverty and famine. The warlord Kiyomori's influence continued to rise. First, he became chancellor, an unprecedented position for a samurai. Then his daughter was made empress, and his grandson the emperor. Kiyomori then moved the entire capital city, what would be known later as Kyoto, to a new capital on the coast, created in his own image. Anyone who spoke against Kiyomori risked being reported and taken away by his secret police. Anyone who stood in the way of his plans was either tortured, banished, or executed. But then, in 1180, the course of history changed once again. A neglected prince, the son of the retired emperor Go Shirakawa, launched a daring revolt, supported by warrior monks of the temples near the capital. Lord Kiyomori rushed to put down the uprising, and his sons defeated the rebels at the Battle of Uji River, but his victory was too late, for before the battle, the prince had sent out a call to arms across Japan, urging the last remaining Genji to rise up against the hated Heike. A call that reached the far north, the central mountains, and, most importantly, the eastern province of Izu, where it reached the ears of the now 33-year-old exile Yoritomo. By the time Yoritomo receives the prince's call, he is now married to a daughter of a local landowner, Masako, who will one day become one of the most powerful female rulers in Japan's history. For now, though, both Yoritomo and Masako are laying low, deciding what would be the best way to respond to this call to arms. Eventually, Yoritomo decides to strike. He orders an attack on Kiyomori's local governor, and in a daring nighttime raid, one of the first ninja-style attacks in history, the governor is assassinated. But Yoritomo still has few supporters, and he is vastly outnumbered. A few days later, his small band of warriors are swept aside at the Battle of Ishibashi, Yoritomo just managing to escape into the mountains. With his pursuers on his tail, Yoritomo makes a great circle around what is now Tokyo Bay, gaining supporters along the way. Finally, he reaches Kamakura, a small fishing town that will one day become the capital of Japan. From Kamakura, he sets out to face Kiyomori's soldiers, and in their first clash, he achieves a surprise victory beneath Mount Fuji. And then, another stroke of luck. Soon after the battle, Yoritomo is reunited with his long-lost half-brother Yoshitsune, and together the two brothers forge an alliance. They know their chances are grim. Lord Kiyomori is now like a giant bear stung by a wasp, and in his rage he threatens to send the full force of his Heike army to destroy his Genji rival. To face Lord Kiyomori, Minamoto no Yoritomo, the descendant of Emperor Seiwa and the future First Shogun of Japan, will need every supporter he can find, and he will need to remove every obstacle that stands in his way. And that is where our story begins. It is now the year 1180, the 4th day of the 11th month. It is a cold and windy morning as two armies face each other across a river in the north-central highlands of Japan. On the west side of the river, the white banners of the Genji flap in the cold November breeze. In the center of the vanguard, a tall warrior holds aloft the Genji standard, attached to which flutters the call to arms sent out months ago by Prince Mochihito. The Genji face on the eastern side of the river, a line of warriors holding red flags. In the distance, they can also see a massive castle that clings to the side of the mountain in a position that appears impregnable. From among the red banners on the far riverbank, the Genji see a man emerge on horseback. He is an elderly man, tall, with a grey beard and dressed in red armour. The old man, who appears to be a general, dismounts and approaches a wooden bridge that separates the two armies. With a wave of his hand, he gestures to the men behind him to stand fast as he advances to the middle of the bridge. From the Genji lines, an armoured man advances on horseback. He dismounts and steps onto the bridge. He removes his helmet, revealing a man in his mid-30s, with a thin moustache and an expression that refuses to reveal any emotions that he may feel. The two men approach each other, and in the center of the bridge they pause, standing just a few meters apart. The bearded veteran is the first to speak. "So, Yoritomo, or Lord of Kamakura, as you style yourself now." The younger man bows in acknowledgement. "Satake no Yoshimasa, thank you for agreeing to meet me. Look, let's dispense with the pleasantries, Yoritomo. Your presence threatens my land and my castle. I would ask that you leave immediately." "Lord Satake, you know why I am here," the younger man replies. "The Hojo, the Miura, Chiba, all these clans have pledged allegiance. Only your family now opposes me in the east. Join our cause. Your support will be immense. Your influence stretches across Itachi province and beyond, and we are part of the same family, descended from the great Minamoto bloodline. Your family, yes, it's true, we once supported you, years ago. But our allegiance to your kin ended with the death of your father, Yoritomo. If he hadn't thrown his life away during Heiji, maybe things would be different. But your father is dead, and so is any hope of the Genji rising again. I'm sorry, but your so-called rebellion is futile. You cannot stand against the might of the Heike." Yoritomo smiles to disguise his frustration. "Lord Satake, perhaps the news has not reached you yet, but I have just routed the Heike army at Fuji River." "Ha! Yes. Satake chuckles to himself. "I heard that at Fuji, a band of drunken Heike retreated, but I also heard your army did not release a single arrow. And you were aided by, what was it? A flock of geese?" Kiyomori sent his teenage grandson against you. That's as much concern he has for you, for now. Next time it will take more than a flock of birds to save you, Yoritomo. Kiyomori has hundreds of thousands of warriors at his call. What chance do you think you have? He has already put down the prince's rebellion, and your uncle, Yoshimasa, sadly is dead. You have no support in the west or the north. Kiyomori controls the emperor, the court, all three of the imperial treasures, while he sits in his new capital at Fukuhara, counting his riches. What do you have, Yoritomo? Throughout Satake's speech, Yoritomo's expression remains impassive. He chooses his next words carefully and raises his voice so the men behind him can hear. We have hope, Lord Satake, and men who are loyal and who will fight to their last breath to rid the scourge of the Heike and bring stability to our realm. Together, we will protect the emperor and restore honor to the samurai. Pah! The bearded warrior snorts in derision and shakes his head. You're deluded. Lord Satake, this is your last chance. Please, join us. Look behind me, Yoritomo. Look at that castle. My son has an army waiting for you up there, and his position is unassailable. An attack would be suicide. There is a pause as the two men glare at each other as they stand face to face in the middle of the bridge. Finally, Yoritomo glances up at the castle and sighs. Very well. If we cannot go with you, Lord Satake, then we must go through you. Suddenly, Satake senses there is someone behind him, and he turns to see a young, pale-faced samurai who has appeared on the bridge as if by magic. The warrior has his hand on his sword. What the... How did... Satake turns back to Yoritomo, alarmed that he is now surrounded. Ah, this is my brother, Kuro. As a boy, he trained with the Tengu goblins at Kurama Temple, so his movements are very difficult to detect. Satake begins to panic. But, Yoritomo, you said we would meet, you and I, to negotiate on this bridge. I did, Lord Satake, but our negotiations are at an end. Yoritomo gives a nod, and before Satake can turn, the silent warrior behind him raises his sword and slices off his head. Satake's body tips over and falls into the river, and his men on the far bank are stunned. Yoritomo raises his fist to signal to the men behind him and shouts, Now! The silent assassin on the bridge wipes blood from his sword as the first men carrying the white banner of the Genji charge towards the castle. It is now late afternoon, and for several hours the Genji warriors have been trying to get a foothold on the slopes approaching the castle on the mountain ridge, but without success. Again and again, the defenders throw boulders and rocks down on the Genji soldiers and shower the attackers with arrows that decimate the Genji troops. Yoritomo can see that his small army is in danger of defeat. One of Yoritomo's warriors, Sasaki Sadatsuna, approaches with a look of concern. My lord, the fortress that the Satake have built cannot be broken by human strength, and the troops inside, except for maybe 1 in 1,000, cannot be hit by our arrows. We need another strategy. Yoritomo turns to his brother. So, Kuro, any suggestions? Yoritomo's younger brother looks up at the castle. Although still young, this man, who will one day be renowned as the great general Yoshitsune, has already shown an eye for strategy. The enemy's eyes are always looking down, so let's attack them from behind. Sadatsuna looks alarmed. But it's a sheer cliff face behind that castle. It's almost impossible to traverse. Yoshitsune smiles. Almost? So it is possible, Sadatsuna. I suppose there is a chance, my lord. According to one of our captives, there is an entrance at the far side, near the cliff. It is a treacherous path, but if we can reach it, the entrance is lightly guarded, and from there, perhaps, we can take control of the castle. Yoritomo nods. Well, it seems we have nothing to lose. Sadatsuna, take a band of 50 soldiers and lead an attack along the path that leads to the rear of the castle. Sadatsuna bows and heads off. For more than 2 hours, Yoritomo and his brother watch nervously as the fighting rages on the castle battlements. And finally, they see something raised over the castle tower. Cheers erupt from the Genji troops as they realize it's a white banner, and Yoshitsune smiles at his brother. Congratulations, my lord, says Yoshitsune. It seems you have removed the last obstacle in the east. It seems so. Yoritomo, in a rare moment, drops his reserve, and there are tears of joy on his cheeks. The two brothers clasp each other's arms. Yoshitsune is laughing. So now, we can strike west, brother, to the Heike. When do we attack? Yoritomo turns back to look up at the castle again, and his expression again becomes serious. Patience, Kuro. The old man on the bridge was right. Kiyomori does hold all the cards, at least for now. The Heike outnumber us, and our victory at Fuji was fortunate, to say the least. Yoritomo mounts his horse. So what do we do? Yoshitsune looks up at his brother. We wait. Wait for what? For something, Kuro. Like today. A shift in the balance of power. A change in the wind. Something will happen, Kuro. I know. I assure you, I can feel it. He can sense his brother's frustration, so he leans down to place his hand on Yoshitsune's shoulder. Don't worry, Kuro. You will get your chance to show your valor. We have a long road ahead, and I will need your support. Yoshitsune looks his brother in the eye. You can depend on me always, brother. I know, Kuro. So now we wait till the right moment. And then we strike. In the next episode, the Lord of the Heike, Kiyomori, has a disturbing vision that sets in motion a shift in the balance of power that will change the history of Japan forever.